or intellectual property rights, especially as they relate to the traditional knowledge and seed rights of the plants we collect and the agreements associated with them. Now, who am I to talk about this? All my degrees are in plant science. My PhD was with CINE, the Center for Indigenous Peoples, Nutrition and Environment. I have worked in biotechnology. I've also worked with Native Seed Search, which is a nonprofit seed conservation organization, particularly on their board looking at IPR issues. I have my own consultant agency now, BotanyDoc, and I'm housed in Tucson, Arizona. So because this is a prickly subject, I've included cacti pictures throughout. So if you've noticed, I've put little pads of paper on the seats because my main hat for this presentation is as the ethics coordinator for SEB. So what we've really been working on is trying to get participation from the members to put examples into our toolkit. So examples of your permitting in different countries, like what's required, any specific clause for an agreement that you use, any particular resource that you found has helped you or your students with ethics issues. I want you to write those down during this presentation so I can collect them at the end. If you are a student, please think of what you would like SEB to help you with in ethics issues. And we have been developing some of these, and that you can see that on the SEB website under the governance tab, and then subsequently the guidelines for professional ethics. And that's also one of the Farm-Dar Code of Ethics, which is also the IC's Code of Ethics. So what are currently the international agreements related to these topics? Well, there's the so-called seed treaty developed by the FAO, and in that they put a number of crop species into the public domain, and that means under government control in national and in their national seed banks. And to access those, you go use standard material transfer agreements. So that means any seed company or breeding company can access those seeds, and then through those transfer agreements, they're agreeing that a percentage of their profits goes back to the country of origin. And then a percentage of that goes into what they term developmental agriculture. And this is in contrast to the Nagoya Protocol, which was recently ratified. And in that, they more specifically focus on what they term ILCs, or indigenous and local communities, and protecting their traditional knowledge through prior informed consent and those agreements, and then monitoring those agreements through clearinghouses. So what about these permitting? Again, I hope any of you that have dealt with permitting issues in countries are writing down on those pads of paper something that you might deal with. So I've certainly heard from some of our members, countries, that it's just impossible to get permits. There's also multiple agencies that could be involved, and that creates confusion for researchers. Sometimes there's political upheaval, and I've heard from some people that said, well, you have to know who the others are as far as who to contact if you want to go to a particular area of the country and make sure they know you. And then for some of you, it's well, it wasn't required before, but now it is, and so there's some confusion there. And I've seen countries that were, well, for most it's, you need to know that there's separate permits for collecting, another one for exporting, and then another one for importing into the United States. A lot of these relate even to our own code of ethics, that you should already have a relationship going so that you can get that letter of introduction that might be required for your permit. You should be prepared to bring reports and publications of your final research from those agreements back to those countries, and you might have to give a cash deposit that shows you will be bringing those back. And the right to bring along staff and students, which again is what we say is another way of giving back, training on the ground. And you might be required to deposit in local and national herbariums and seed banks of what you've collected. So then how to make research agreements. Again, if some of you know certain clauses, write those down for us. These are some of the toolkit items we've put on the website. Brown University has a nice listing of training materials. The American Association of Anthropology has some resources. ISE is still working on their toolkit. Some of the websites we've listed include ones that focus on farmers' rights and biopiracy. And then CINE, and on the WHO website, there are some agreement formats. Oh dear, I don't know why that's not the page. And then when you are collecting your plants, what are some of the methods to protect the traditional knowledge and IPR? Well, I know many of you, when you collect, you have your sheet that describes the plant and where it's located and what grows with it. But on the flip side, or attached to it, you can have another sheet that is a checklist that the donor and you can check and sign at the end that says, well, these plants were collected on tribal land or not, that there's an agreement associated with these seeds or not, that there's an understanding what the collector is going to do with those seeds and if it's going to be deposited in the National Seed Bank, for example, so that there's documentation that understanding is already there. And then if your collection notes should really be in some sort of publicly accessed database. That means for researchers and for the USDA, because then if a patent or more particular plant variety certificate application goes in there, they can say, well, no, look, I have access to these notes that say these seeds are used by these people in this other part of the world. You can't restrict the use of these seeds. And then if you deposit in herbarium, you have to think about, okay, is this part of my permitting requirements? Is part of those requirements that there's access to these herbarium sheets? And is there a way that some of your traditional knowledge is going to be accessed through this? So you have to make sure your agreements are still intact when you do this. And Wendy Hodgson, as well as our own Bob By, has written articles about this, how to get ethnobotanical information onto your collection sheets, and how to link it to agreements, which can be done on annotation labels after. And what about if you have to deposit in the seed bank, how to protect the rights at that point? Well, the FAO has developed those seed transfer agreements. The USDA has their own list of particular transfer agreements, and you can create your own non-standard agreements, which is what Native Seed Search did, so that on each packet, it says that acceptance of these seeds is an agreement that they will not be used for a patent outcome, or PVP, we say, unless you go back and get more written agreements from the originators of the seeds. Other ways is be sure and see if the seed bank has ways to restrict use, whether it be through black boxes, through restricted use material lists, or like the Missouri Botanical Garden, you can get it on your certain transfer agreements that they're not going to be available for bioprospecting endeavors. And then finally, again, that Nagoya Protocol, hopefully this will help these issues, in that there's these access and benefit clearinghouses where they monitor those agreements, making sure the benefits go back to the community and that the genetic resources are monitored through each step from getting access to those resources. But there have been problems. This has only been recently ratified, so sometimes there's multiple agencies involved and sometimes they're dealing with multiple treaties. And the legal frameworks haven't been developed in those countries yet to oversee these. But there's that website on our current toolkit that accesses a lot of these clearinghouses and contact points for each country as to where to put those agreements. But you should know that also on that website is news items that includes biopiracy. I want any of us to be on that list. So again, help your other members. I think that's the biggest benefit about being in this society, is accessing the knowledge and experience of our other members. And this toolkit and what you write down on these pads is a way to give back to all of the memberships here. Including, you can write down comments or suggestions that you would like the toolkit or the ethics committee to do. You can include countries and dates. You can include your own email and something that's on the top of your head, a topic that I can email you later and will be sent to me. You can remain anonymous if you like. And that's my email. So, thank you. I'm going to collect those sheets now. I'll know if you've written or not.